Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who's a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we're going to be talking about The Mandalorian Season 2, Chapter 15, or I guess Episode 7 of Season 2. By the way, this will indeed include spoilers, and so if you do not want any spoilers on this episode, you may not want to watch this video. Do not complain about spoilers in the comments like I've had some people do in the past, even once I've warned them about spoilers. But before we dive into this review, please go ahead and smash the like button, hit the subscribe, and also hit the bell notification. That way you know every time a new video goes live on the channel. So, this episode picks up where we left off, where, of course, little baby Yoda, as I'm going to continue to call him, little Grogu, has been stolen, obviously, by Moff Gideon, and now the Mandalorian needs to be able to find a way to locate Moff Gideon so that he can then find Baby Yoda and save him, because he has a strong connection with him that he cannot quite break. This is going to require him to enlist the skills of, once again, the lovely Cara Dune, and it is just great to always see her back onto the screen. So shout out to Gina Carano, always great to see her. She definitely had more of a role to play in this episode again, which was also great to see. It also requires him, though, to go into his past a little bit, going into first season and having to enlist the skills of a character played by Bill Burr. And I will say, to see Bill Burr and Gina Carano both on screen together, both of which are not a part of the Hollywood elite establishment, was quite a wonderful thing to see, and I cannot wait to see more of it in the future. I know that yesterday they obviously announced a lot of new Star Wars projects, and one of them seems like it could possibly be a Gina Carano type series where it is her in the lead. I'm not going to lie, it'd be really awesome if Gina Carano and Bill Burr had their own series together. I'm just going to throw it out there. If you do that, if you were to put that series out there and they were the two leads, guess what? I'd watch it. And if you let the writing team do their job and, you know, craft a really good story and allow Bill Burr to be hilarious and Gina Carano to continue to be a badass doing most of her own stunts, guess what? That's a show that I would watch, that's a show that I would review, and that's a show that I would recommend. So we'll have to, of course, wait and see if that show comes to fruition. But back to this episode, we get to learn a little bit more about Bill Burr's character. You know, obviously he is a former member of the Empire, and so we get to learn a little bit more about what caused him to leave the Empire. There was this terrible event where he lost many of his friends in this huge event, and it was all seen as collateral damage, all for the greater good, and you can see that that was the moment where he was basically done with the Empire, and so it's really cool to see that. Also, we get to see a little bit of the Mandalorian's face in this episode. In fact, for a pretty good chunk of it. In fact, Bill Burr actually gets to see it, and it was pretty interesting getting to see the actor on screen and get to see him on screen for quite a bit. You know, I figured that they might try and do some type of, you know, pushing people around and you know, doing creative shots and all that kind of stuff, but they don't really end up doing that, which I found kind of interesting, that they were able to kind of show his face as much as they were able to do in this way. And so, obviously, you do have in this episode, you have Miggs Mayfield, the character played by Bill Burr, Cara Dune by Gina Carano. You have Boba Fett coming back as well. Always great to see Boba Fett back on the big screen. You also had Fennec Shand on the screen again. And again, I think that her role so far has been pretty good. Again, very understated, and she's been a bit of a badass as well. And then, of course, Giancarlo Esposito comes in at the very end of the episode as Moff Gideon. But overall, this episode was very good. It was very well written. It was very well directed. I have to continue to give a shout out to the visual effects team for really utilizing a lot of practical effects, and I think using CGI sparingly, and when they do use it, to use it pretty well. I've been very impressed so far with that. There's been obviously moments in several episodes, and this episode is no different, where you can tell that it's a very artificial background, where it's a very artificial CGI-looking screen. However, luckily that's been more so limited than not, and so that has made it a lot more enjoyable. Also, a huge shout-out to the stunt team, especially because the stunt teams have been really making these episodes, because this season especially has had a lot more action, has had a lot more action sequences. This episode was no different, and it was just really awesome to see the hand-to-hand combat, especially when the Mandalorian is on the back of this transport and having to fight off pirates. I thought it was very well done, and I thought that it was great for them to not just, you know, constantly go back and forth and not do quick cuts and that kind of nonsense. Again, always really great to see that happen. Also, I don't think I've ever really stated this before, how much I actually really love the score of this show. I actually always wait until the very end, until the end credits, and let the score play out, because there's a part where you have this, essentially this climax in the score where all of a sudden the horns come in, and there's just something amazing about it, and there's just something classical about it too. It reminds me a lot of more classical movie scores in that way, and I'm not really even the hugest fan of Ludwig Göransson, because really up to this point, the most famous score he's done was his Oscar-winning score for Black Panther, which I thought was totally an unnecessary Oscar nomination and even win, because that score, yeah, it was fine. I mean, it was serviceable, but there was really nothing recognizable or nothing memorable about that score. Not so much with this one, right? In this series, you really do have, I think, a very unique score that definitely plays into the Western, space Western type show that this is. And it makes me really do wish, because this show obviously is still not perfect, so don't take my praise as this being like, oh, all the mistakes are gone and all the issues are gone away, and I'm in love with Lucasfilm now, because that's obviously not true. This show, it definitely still feels like a video game cutscene, right? Every single episode, it's like, oh, let's go on another adventure, let's go on another side quest, let's do this or that. This one, though, I think felt the least like that, and I think that really has to go out to Rick Famuyiwa. I have no idea if I'm Famuyiwa. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, but he did a great job. He wrote and directed this, and I think that his writing really did make this feel more just like a fun episode in a space western, more so than other episodes have been in the past, where they've, again, really felt more like those video game cutscenes. So very well done, well written, well directed. Overall, again, I give high praise to this episode, and if I had to score it out of 10, I'd give this one a 9 out of 10, maybe a 9.5 out of 10. Again, this is probably one of the strongest episodes so far in the series. It's definitely up there with the Deborah Chow episodes of the first season, I would argue. And it was also just fun. I think it's not that necessarily that it was the most groundbreaking episode, but it was just a lot of fun. I mean, I think a lot of that goes down to, though, Bill Burr. I think Bill Burr really does bring something to it, right? He brings this human quality. I mean, I don't think people recognize that he's a good actor, right? He's a great stand-up comedian, but he's also a pretty talented actor as well, and he really brings this humanity to this character of Mix Mayfield that I really don't think gets enough attention to it. But anyway, with Pedro Pascal, you actually get to see his face in this episode. I was blanking on his name earlier. But as I said, he is definitely someone where I don't understand quite. I think he was nominated for an Emmy, potentially, and it doesn't make any sense to me why, because you only really hear his voice, and his voice is so understated, it's not much of a, it doesn't seem like that much of a performance to me, so I don't quite understand that choice there. However, what I will say is that in this episode, getting to see some of his facial reactions as the Mandalorian, where normally you have to envision what his face looks like underneath the helmet, in this one you actually get to see, especially was Bill Burr's going back and forth with his former head officer, basically calling him out, saying, yeah, remember that day when you killed and allowed the death of thousands and thousands of your own troops, many of my own friends in my unit? And again, you start to see this tension build up. Bill Burr does this great job of building up the fact that he cares a lot. Eventually, of course, leads to him, boom, shooting the officer, which was awesome and badass. But also, just to see the understated performance of Pedro Pascal, it was something where I'm like, oh, he can actually act. It reminded me a little bit of his time in Game of Thrones when he was shown to be an actual actor. So it's great to see him do that. And if he can only just get off of Twitter and stop being a complete asshat in real life, maybe he would be someone that people will be drawn to more. Kind of how people are drawn so much to Gina Carano, because she's awesome on social media. She doesn't take any stances, really, except to say, yeah, don't bow to the mob, which I think is a stance that most sensible people can absolutely take in. Whereas with Pedro Pascal, you've got obviously TDS and all this other nonsense, and I think that's what draws people more so away from it. And also, it's what draws people away from this show, right? There's still so many people that hate this show more so because of the politics behind the scenes and of the actors and of the creators behind it, rather than judging the show itself. And I think that could easily be fixed if these asshats in Hollywood just shut up for a second, because Jon Favreau, I think, is doing something really interesting here. Is this the best Star Wars that we've ever had? No, right? The original trilogy still has that, but this is stuff that I think is very, very promising for the future of Star Wars, especially with the recent announcement of more Star Wars series based in this universe and headed by Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni to some extent. Again, I think Dave Filoni, if he's under the reins of somebody, I think that he's actually a pretty good creative mind. That's why he was so effective under, under the guise of George Lucas, right? Because he was able to really pick up what George Lucas was putting down and to give it his own spin and to live in that universe and do a really good job with it. And again, he's done some mixed work so far with The Mandalorian, so it'll be interesting to see if he has his own show and he's the lead creator behind his own live action show. But yeah, anyway, that's my thoughts about this episode. The Believer, again, I thought it was a strong episode. We've got one more episode until the end of the season, which was another thing too, where it's like, man, we're definitely building up to an end point to this season, but at the same time, with these episodes and their lengths being so different and everyone having a different director and writer, Jon Favreau's written most of them, but having kind of like this back and forth where you have different writers and different directors on, throughout the season, it definitely feels like there's just different creative minds behind each episode, which is both a strength and a weakness, because we've gotten to the point now where we're at the end of the season, it's like, I feel like there's so much more that should have happened. I feel like there's so much episode and so much time in episodes that have just been wasted, as far as just being kind of filler. This, to me, wasn't as much of a filler episode, though I'm sure some people will definitely take it that way, because I do think there was just some solid writing and background on these characters. And anytime you find out more about the characters and you get more in-depth insight into those characters and their backgrounds, I think that is beyond what a filler episode is. Like, filler episodes are just like, meh. This episode's unnecessary and does nothing to progress the story and does nothing at all. But when you are diving into the backgrounds of characters, that by its very nature does, continue on in the story. All I can say is that I'm excited to see more episodes with this crew of Boba Fett, the Mandalorian, Cara Dune, and also Fennec Shand as well. I think it's fantastic. I wish that Bill Burr would have stayed on. At the very end of the episode, Bill Burr gets to be free, essentially, and I was very sad to see that, because I was hoping that it would be kind of like this nod of, hey, how we announced all of our Star Wars stuff yesterday? Hey, we're going to set up a Bill Burr and a Gina Carano show. I would be down for that, but never knew it. Anyway, let me know your thoughts about this episode in the comments section below. If you like this video, smash the like button, hit that subscribe. It helps out a lot. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Also, if you want to support this channel, check out links in the description below. You are all amazing. Have a wonderful day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my December Patreon and Subscribe Star members, starting off with Patreon, Albertus Magnus, Andrew Hoyle, Animation Commentator, Brian P., Dion, Divex, Enrique Evangelista, Father Christopher Miller, hail to you, Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Harold Francis, The Hunky Chunky Funky Monkey, Inflamed Wood, It's a Trap Productions, Jason Clark, Jacob Juice, Jay, Jeffrey Toon, Jonathan Carney, Kenneth Cameo, Laura Story, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mike Jackson, Mr. Peabody and his evil twin with the beautiful hair, On to June, Orange Hat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Outpost Dyer, Riff Magos, Rosetta Allen, Steve Glasker, Miss Martin Muses, also known as Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, Tina Bogend, Tina B, and the Modern Major General, Laura Story. Gotta give you that shout out for that one time that you were doubled up. Thank you very much for being my Patreon members. And now a huge shout out to all of my December Subscribe Star members we have over there with Stand For, Perpetual Punster, Robert Revo, Mr. Roy, Glinzer, Darkstar 57, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., US 888209 Fast, Dean Heiss, J-Rod the Beer Guru, Nevadan G. Adams, and ZK Man. Thank you all so much for being my Patreon and Subscribe Star members. If you want your name shouted out at the end of every video and live stream on the main channel, please consider joining over on those platforms. You can also get access to things like exclusive giveaways of 4Ks, Blu-rays. If you want a DVD, I guess you could also get a DVD as well, digital codes, and of course, you get to possibly join me on the channel once a month for the Chosen of Valhalla live stream and access to an exclusive podcast featuring John the Flick Pick Flickinger, where we have a lot of fun talking about movies and tons of other random things. Anyway, if you want to support these things, check out the links in the description of this video. And also, please consider joining my other channel, the OMB Report, where I talk about not just movies like I do over here, but I focus more so on politics, news, and culture in that order. You guys are all amazing. Thank you for your love and support. Have a wonderful day. And as always, God bless.